So, Ron, thanks very much for joining me today.
My pleasure.
What are you doing here in Black Hat?
We've come to show off Purple Knight, a community tool, and introduce a new edition.
Talk to me about the evolution of that. You know, again, you have a commercial. You're a for-profit, right? It's Semperis.com, not .org. But then you aside from that, you still give back and create all those tools to basically promote the security of the overall Active Directory in an ecosystem, right?
Yep.
So talk to me. I'm wearing this shirt and it's green.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to me about what is that?
So Forest Druid is our newest addition to the Purple Knight family, and it originated from a challenge that we've had. So all of our threat research come up with indicators and great way of finding the exposures and vulnerabilities, but it always comes down to the question of where is my privileged perimeter? Okay, at what point does non-privileged become privileged? And answering that question, as we worked on it and thought about it and worked with customers, we started to see the correlation between that and the problem of attack paths, right? And what the work that SpectropOps has done with Bloodhound to make attack paths really a part of kind of the methodology when it comes to understanding your AD environment. And the question that we kept asking is, okay, we have potentially thousands of attack paths in an organization, but what do we really care about? And what do our indicators really care about? And the conclusion that we came up with time and time again is that what is privileged? What am I really trying to protect? And so what we did with Forest Druid is we took the attack path concept and we flipped it over. We say, let's not look at it from an attacker's perspective, the outside in, how do I get to domain admin or whatever it is, but let's look at it from inside out as a defender. Start with what do I really care about? And for Forest Druid, specifically, we're starting with what's called tier 0, right, which is kind of the administrative layer of Active Directory. And we've got those defaults. And then we're showing you, these are what we're calling the privilege escalation hops. These are the hops that take you from an unprivileged, a non-tier 0 identity to a tier 0 identity. It's a specific access permission or something that allows you to do stuff within tier 0. And we're going to call that your perimeter. Now, you as the administrator, you have to look at this perimeter and decide, is this legitimate or is it not? And you start to get two lists. Everything that is legitimate becomes your new tier 0. That is your actual tier 0 perimeter. And this is a methodology and a process that the user goes through, the end of which, the deliverable, is that we now have the real privileged identities that we can then feed back into our ongoing assessment of AD to understand where our real vulnerabilities and where the real attack paths lie.
So it's super interesting how you inversed, the kind of the logic behind it. Let's figure out first what are the kind of the crown jewels from an identity perspective, and then as opposed to go after, okay, what is the attacker going to do? So in your experience, what happened when you run this tool? What are kind of the results that people are taking? Are they like surprised? Are they, because again, I think that there's a lot of mystery associated with Active Directory, depending on the size of the organization, depending on how many forests or trees you have, and so on. So talk to me about kind of the results of running this tool at various different infrastructures.
It's interesting because we see different organizations that have very large AD environments, in the tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of users, but still their AD structure is relatively simple. And it's great because when you run a tool like this, then you get a graph, right? And you get a graph in a table of these objects. And immediately, the human mind works that way is that you start to draw pictures, right? And the pictures can either be very complex and convoluted and you're looking at it and, oh my God, what is going on here? And what we're trying to do with this tool is we're trying to simplify. So we're only focusing on like the inner core of what's important. And it's color coded. So you see, okay, this is my tier 0, and you see these orange arrows that are like, okay, this is the risky parts. So in the larger environments, they immediately get an intuitive sense of, oh no, I'm in deep trouble, or I've been doing a good job. Without a KPI, without a score, just by looking at this picture. And so we saw very large environments with
So it's almost like a heat map, or like where you actually can see it graphically speaking, like what. So the color are indicators of the, I guess the level of risk associated with that particular identity. Is that correct?
So right now, so we're trying to make this very simple. So it's just two colors. It's either risky or it's not. Okay, it's either tier 0, meaning that it should be treated as privileged, or it's risky. And now you have to decide whether you want to mitigate this risk or you want to accept this risk. And your decision there determines what your real identity perimeter is. Because if you've accepted this, if this user has legitimate control over a domain controller, for example, then you need to start treating this user as if she is within the tier 0 perimeter.
Right, which is the consequences of that, maybe privilege access management on top of that, or whatever else security controls associated with that.
Exactly, the privilege access management, monitoring, multi-factor auth, everything
all And so typically that's not the case today, right? So what you see a tremendous gap, right? You see all those 0, identities where they have all those access, but do not have the security control over it. So, and is that the typical environment, or have you seen like sometimes when you run the tool and everything's great, like there's no results?
You'll always see attempts to do it. So every organization will try to implement PAM or MFA for their administrators, right? To some degree of success. So the domain admins will usually have some controls already in place, but what's more enlightening is seeing those attack paths that they didn't know about. So these are usually groups within groups or delegations that were set up years ago. We had one case where there was an administrator that got moved out of the administrators group, but they left them with permissions for syncing changes to a domain controller.
And that's typical, right? It's like this is not a singular case. This happens all the time, right? Because again, people move around, and the complexity associated with the domain controller and the Active Directory is not something it's trivial they can pinpoint. And so how many years do you think that person had access like that without?
Oof.
Do you think what's your
5 or 6 years. This specific instance was part of an M&A that this company went through, and M&As are very tricky, because if you're doing an M&A and now you need to join a domain into the Forest, and now maybe you have SID history, and now maybe you had to have an admin to do the syncing, and maybe you want to do the application, so maybe now you have a new service account set up. So those are very tricky, but just over the course of time, there's so much permission debt that you accumulate over time, and permission creep, and all of those.
I like that. So those are industry terms?
I think so. They're definitely used.
Yeah, they're very cool.
I don't know if they're formal.
No, I like that. I really do. So once they find that, what action can they take, and do they have to run the tool again to continuously monitor? Because again, some of those environments are dynamic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we do suggest running the tool at least on a monthly basis. In the tool itself, you can import the previous settings or the previous work you did, so you don't have to start over every time you run the tool. And the output of the free community tool is an actionable list. So you actually get a CSV or an Excel of these are the relationships that I need to take care of. This principal has these types of privileges over this principal. Now I need to take care of that, and it varies from permission to permission and from context to context. Some things are as simple as going into the users and computers snap in and just removing the permissions. Some are more complex. If you have a service account that's still in use and has some delegation, you're going to need to mitigate that some other way.
And let's say you run this tool and the people need some help associated with like mitigating, because again, not everybody has the expertise. Can they go back to Semperis for help? Like at what point in time can they turn into from a kind of a community resource to a customer, and what do they get if they convert themselves into a commercial license?
Well, we'll start by saying that this is where the community comes in, and we're a big believer in community. So we do have the Slack channels, and we're setting up other methods to that the community can talk about these things and suggest remediation to each other, and you know, each environment is going to be very, very different in how they have AD set up, but we can learn from each other, right? And what they did in this environment might be applicable here and so on. But beyond that, yeah, Semperis does offer services as well as commercial products.
And so the tools themselves, would they should work conjunction, like one with another, or is it they're completely standalone? What's your take on it?
They do work with each other. So again, these are our free tools.
Yep.
Within our commercial products, the technologies work together to provide a single picture before, during, and after. The free tools are designed to provide specific values in specific areas, but we do expect them to work together. When you run the security indicators within the Purple Knight scanner, you get different lists of dangerous permissions and objects and users and computers and so on. And we actually were demoing this in the Black Hat Arsenal, where you can use a finding that you found in the scanner, search for it within Forest Druid, and see exactly how it relates to your tier 0 perimeter, and even see further hops upstream of that specific object, how an attacker could potentially subvert that user to take over tier 0. So they do work together. Within the community context, then they are separate tools.
And have you had a chance to quantify, like, how much of risk reduction do you get from running these tools? And then have the companies tried to maybe hire like pen testers to review what they've done and maybe compare results?
So yeah, definitely. With the Purple Knight scanner, we've seen 45% risk reduction. And we've talked to hundreds of customers who've been using Purple Knight for a while. Yeah.
45%. That's a significant risk reduction as well. Especially when the tool does not cost you anything.
Well, I mean, you get the visibility that you get, and the fact that it is actionable visibility. It's not just a flat list of stuff. It provides the context of the risk and what you need to do to remediate. I think that's what's important. So it allows the administrators who are not security pros, or the security pros who are not administrators, to do something about it, which allows for this risk reduction. Mm-hmm. With Forest Druid is a new tool. We're just introducing it, so we haven't quantified it yet. Right. But we're expecting it to be as much, if not even more.
And there's a movement to cloud infrastructure right now, and there's this Active Directory that's based on the Azure Active Directory and so on, cloud. On the migration to the cloud, or having like a hybrid environment, are those tools help you in that process of migrating, or what's the kind of the process of going there and adding cloud infrastructure to these tools?
So we've added Azure AD scanning to Purple Knight, mm-hmm. and the goal with that is to provide visibility to hybrid environments. And the challenge with hybrid environments is that the potential for damage is exponential, because if you are able to compromise Azure through on-prem or vice versa, then you've compounded the damage you can do. And there are a lot of these. They're not exactly vulnerabilities because they don't have CVEs behind them, right? But they are misconfigurations. For example, if you have a privileged account on-prem that is synced to a privileged account in Azure, right? And you're able to take, or an attacker is able to take over a privileged account in AD, the amount of damage they can now do in Azure is substantial. Right, and just getting the visibility that says, "Hey, watch out! That there's somebody who's privileged both here and here. You should have more controls over them." That's what we provide with Purple Knight, and that's kind of the hybrid challenge.
Yeah, and it's interesting. A lot of times, configuration is like one of the key aspects of being breached. It's the human element associated with like configuration and adding, subtracting users or moving users and so on. We've seen that over and over again. not just in Active Directory, but other types of infrastructure as well. So what's next? You're launching this. Talk to me about the kind of the process of launching, when it's going to be available, what's the process of downloading it, where do you get documentation, what's the support like, and so on.
So Purple Night is free. You download it from purplenight.com website, purple-night.com. No installation is required, no domain admin. You run it as a normal domain user. You just run the executable and it just works. And we have the community to answer any support questions and to talk about mitigation, to talk about tool improvements, ideas for new indicators, new permissions. And it's a great community.
Are people posting some certain findings that they find? It's all excited that they found this, vulnerability or found this misconfiguration. Do they share that with the community as well?
Well, they're not going to upload the data.
No, of course.
We don't ask them to. And by the way, that is an important point. We do not send any data anywhere. Okay, there's no data sent. The only thing that we do is check for updates. But yeah, they don't send their data, but they will say, hey, I found this. I don't know. I'm always going to DC sync. We found this DC sync permission. What does it mean? And you'll have a lot of people answering them from their experience. Yeah, I saw this in my environment, and I found that it was this and this and that. And it's great to see because really, there's so many years behind it, and so many different methods of implementation. It's not just one thing. And there's thousands of great professionals out there who can talk about it, and
In the Forest Druid, when is that coming up for release?
So Forest Druid is also going to be on purplenight.com, and it's going to be available later this month.
Okay, and then the process of using it is similar.
Yep.
It's downloading an executable, you run it.
Exactly. Download, run.
And do you request anything back from the users, like feedback or anything like that to participate? I know you do host an annual conference as part of giving back to community as well.
Yep.
So is there like a feedback loop from users to provide feedback for the next release and so on?
Yes, the answer is yes. We're doing it through the community portal, so through Slack and through our email channels. We also have a presence in conferences that are specific community presence. In Black Hat, we have a community happy hour. And what's great, and we also reach out to customers who are willing to answer our questions. All of that is completely voluntary. And we're seeing a good response. The people who are getting these tools, the users who are using these tools, they want to give back. They want a better tool. Yeah. So we're happy to be there.
I tell you what, I love the art, the logos. It's I don't think Active Directory security was never been so cool.
Yeah.
I appreciate you coming over and explaining what you guys do. And again, thank you very much for giving back to community and helping everybody to be more secure.
It's a lot of fun. Thank you.
Thanks, Warren. Appreciate it.